Being on the board comes with a lot of responsibility.
When we enter the boardroom, we are responsible for the entire enterprise. So a lot of that really has to do with the art of asking good questions.
Do people speak up when they see things not going the right way?
It's important to speak up. It's also equally important to know not just what to say, but how to say it and when to say it. In a boardroom, we are a collection of peers. It's a lot about how do you influence outcomes. Once you leave those titles behind, the question of who am I, what am I, becomes very, very difficult to deal with.
Do you think portfolio career is really benefiting women more than men? Welcome to another episode of Rewrite the Rules. We are at season 4. Today, our guest is a global board director who was the first female chairperson of the Singapore Institute of Directors. She's an adjunct professor at NUS. She's a professional speaker who inspires leaders to drive transformation, motivate teams across the globe. Welcome, Su-Yen Wong, to the episode.
Thank you, Ritu. Great to be here.
So what I actually said in the introduction, Su-Yen, was just a very tiny fraction of everything that you do. There's so much more than that. But I want to start our conversation with focusing on your journey to being on the boards, because a lot of people right now, some of our listeners actually are also on that journey and people want to know. Let's start with your journey.
I started my first non-executive director role over 15 years ago. At the time, it was really driven by a sense of how can I contribute more to an organization? I was working as an advisor to some of the world's most complex and innovative companies. But as a consultant, it's still up to the organization to take things forward.
Yeah.
And as a board director, I thought that I might be able to get a step closer to be able to engage with the organization and drive the strategy forward. So that was a starting point. Today, I serve on boards above the equator, below the equator, and at the equator. So one in the US, one in Australia, and a few that are in Asia.
Perfect. And 15 years back, wow. I'm just pausing because people think like today you're ready and tomorrow you get on board, right? Like, so I'm glad you highlighted that. What, in your experience, makes for a really effective board member?
I would put down 2 dimensions, and then I'll add on another set of 2 dimensions. So the first set of dimensions, I would say, is curiosity and courage. So curiosity because as a board director, it's about having a very good holistic view about the entire organization. So regardless of where somebody starts in the board journey, somebody might have come up from a finance background, or they may have come up from a marketing background or human capital background or a technology background. When we enter the boardroom, we are responsible for the entire enterprise. So a lot of that really has to do with the art of asking good questions. And that's where the curiosity comes in. And a lot of it is also about learning and contributing to the dialogue. So that's the first thing. The second part, though, I would say, is around the courage to make difficult decisions, because in the boardroom, very often we're dealing with issues that are not so obvious. It requires courage to sometimes take a stance, sometimes to actually turn something down, to perhaps even go against the prevailing wisdom. So curiosity and courage.
Yeah.
The other set of 2 dimensions that I would say is balancing support and control. One is by challenging in terms of how do you actually challenge and ensure you've got the right controls. But challenge in and of itself without support can be very destructive.
Yeah.
In the same way that pure support without those controls and that challenge is simply rubber stamping, right? So getting these 2 sort of dimensions aligned is really important.
Wow. I think you make some really good points. In your experience, what do you find? Do people speak up when they see things not going the right way? Or, is that the right thing to do? Or people just kind of say, oh, I'm a board member, so I can be quiet. Like, what do you see?
So it's really important to have clarity around one's thought process. And it's also equally important to know not just what to say, but how to say it and when to say it.
Like that.
So absolutely, it's important to speak up, but speak up has so many different variations, right? So how do you present your views in the way that leads to the outcomes that are desirable? Because equally, in a boardroom, we are a collection of peers. It's a little bit different than a management situation where you have a sort of reporting hierarchy. We're a basic collection of peers. So it's a lot about how do you influence outcomes and also be open to being influenced, right? So it's that delicate balance. So yes, absolutely speak up, but it's not about being a bull in a china shop.
Yeah.
Because that will probably not lead to desired outcomes.
Exactly, yeah. It could be disruptive. And that kind of makes a nice segue into the second thing I wanted to ask you is about your, your journey of being the first female chairperson of Singapore Institute of Directors. So the reason why I ask that is people, before they go on boards, they have to learn something, right? And that's what SID does, essentially kind of equip people. So talk to me a little bit about that. What can people do to prepare themselves? But also first, talk about your journey of holding that position as one of the first.
So maybe I'll start by saying that the board directorship journey is best thought of as a profession unto its own. So like many others, my initial preconception was that it was the sort of the logical progression. But actually, to your point, it's about learning how to be a board director. And so part of that involves learning, everything from the regulations to different functional domains that one might be less familiar with, risk management, strategy, digital and cyber risk, all the rest of that. But it's not only about learning. When you think about what the Singapore Institute of Directors does, it is a combination of equipping people with the skills and the knowledge, and building those competencies, but also curating the right kind of community, right? So it's a combination of thought leadership, professional development, as well as the kinds of networks that are helpful for somebody who's in their board journey. So when I stepped into the role, there were a few things that I wanted to accomplish for the organization. And that was to really think about how the profession should continue to evolve and professionalize itself. By that, I mean, how do we actually broaden the scope when we think about board directors of the kinds of organizations that really need good governance? Because very often people think about this as, it's a listed company, so it needs to have good governance. But there are actually thousands and thousands of other organizations that actually take on public funds or have responsibilities to investors that also need good governance. So everything from an association to a charity to a club, they all have a governance structure and requires knowledge of the directors to be doing the right thing, because they're there to shepherd the interests. So how do we ensure that we widen the lens of when we talk about good governance? What does that actually mean? And second, to also build a robust pipeline of board directors who are equipped to serve across all these different dimensions. And so it's been about increasing diversity of all forms. It's about bringing in certainly more women, but it's not just that. It's bringing in younger directors as well, bringing in directors who may represent different nationalities, different backgrounds, different functional domains, so that that richness can permeate the boardroom. So you asked about being the first female chairperson. It's really not about being the first female chairperson, but it's really hopefully about not being the last female chairperson. And really opening the doors to get more women into boardrooms as well.
Well said, well said. If there's somebody listening who wants to start on a journey of being on board, what are the 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever number of steps you would say? Like, where does a person start?
The first thing I would say is to certainly build up a baseline set of competencies. It's no different that if somebody said, I want to become a lawyer, we would say, go learn what it takes to be a lawyer, right? Or if you're going to learn how to drive, you go get your driver's license. So go through a process of learning. Second, I would say is engage with the community. One of the things about, particularly for executives, who come up through corporate roles is we get where we are because we're really good at that particular area of specialization, sometimes in that particular industry.
Correct.
So I often tell people, let's say you're from the pharmaceutical industry and you walk into a pharmaceutical conference, you know half the people in the room.
Yeah.
Or if you're a marketing person, you walk into a marketing conference, again, you know half the people in the room. But the thing about moving into the board director space, think about it as a different space. So how do you build your understanding, awareness, networks in that community? So for that reason, I would say that besides the learning, complement it by developing a new network. And of course, part of that is joining the right communities to be able to help you do that. And of course, the Singapore Institute of Directors is one way to do that.
Okay, perfect. Talking about, as you said, expanding your learning, expanding your network, doing something different. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because right now there's a lot of talk around portfolio careers, pivoting at the right time, getting the right skill, and who better than to talk about on this topic than you, because just your career journey has been so many different things you've tried, but also you started this remarkable reinventors community, and I've been following that work closely. So tell us more about that.
I think many of us grew up with the narrative that you should pick a lane and stick in that lane.
Yeah.
So be a specialist, whatever that domain is. However, I think the world has changed for a few reasons. One is we are living a lot longer, which means that if you do something for 20 over years, been there, done that, time to flip the page and move on to the next thing.
Yes.
So then what is that next thing? So that's one element. Second element is if you look at how work is fragmenting from a corporate side as well as from an individual perspective, these two factors are converging. Companies want more flexibility in terms of the workforce, but equally, for some individuals, that flexibility is also highly prized because we are, at the end of the day, multifaceted individuals. And you could make the argument that for many years, we've kind of put some of that aside. But actually now, and I think COVID was a catalyst, sort of how do we live, as holistic individuals, right? And so when you put these elements together, and of course on top of that, you've got technology that has enabled a bit more fragmentation of work and processes, right? So I started seeing this pattern I suppose probably about 10 years ago. And what I started to see was that people were starting to look at an alternative way. And so in 2020, I actually started to pull this community together because I noticed that it can be a very lonely journey for people, particularly if you grow up in an industry or a corporate environment. Really, the narrative is you do a good job, you get promoted, you move to the next thing, or then you get a new job. And you sort of follow that wave, right?
That's right.
And that wave is great. It comes with a business card. It comes with a logo behind you. But once somebody decides to step out and curate their own portfolio, the first question is, what should be in that portfolio? Because, sometimes having a lot of choice is very difficult.
Yes.
Right? So,
paradox of choice.
Exactly. Yes. So the starting point is, well, what are my options when you come out from a corporate environment? In a corporate environment, you've got a lot of infrastructure that surrounds you.
That's right.
Once you move into a portfolio, then you need to start deciding how you want to make those decisions and trade-offs.
Absolutely. No, I was nodding so vigorously because I can relate to it. About 11 years back, actually 10 years back, when I decided to get off the corporate world, it's the same thing.
Yes.
So I'm really happy to hear that now we've got communities. And of course, what kind of saw me through this last 10 years is the power of community. But there is also a little bit of, people think portfolio careers means you can do whatever you want, however you want. There's a little bit of myth or maybe misunderstanding, so to say, around it, right? Where do people struggle with when they start their journey to portfolio careers?
I think the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity of a portfolio is that there is no one model answer.
Yeah.
It's just like a financial portfolio.
Yeah.
Everyone's portfolio is unique.
Yeah.
And that uniqueness has to do with our personal circumstances, our life stage, our interests, how we choose to, balance the portfolio between professional versus non-professional pursuits. And that is going to be different. You can't really just say, give me one of those, right? It's a little bit different, right? When you're in the corporate world, you can kind of say, I'd like to be the VP of this, or I'd like to be the director of that, right? And there's sort of models that more or less have a particular archetype, but portfolios are really quite unique.
Is there a particular area where you see people struggling a lot? Like, I'll tell you, like when I speak with people, there's one challenge they say is accountability. It's creating accountability. So they get excited, they've said, okay, I'm designing a portfolio career, I'm designing my portfolio, and they're really, very motivated, energetic, but then 3 months, 6 months, like they don't see a lot of traction and the energy starts to deplete. So I see accountability as like a major challenge that people have when they're starting out on this portfolio career, because you're responsible only to yourself and accountable to yourself. Is there anything else you see?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's one of those things where it's important but not urgent.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? So it can slip another day. Oh, wait, it can slip another week. Oh, wait a minute, it slipped another month. Oh my goodness, it's another year, right? And that's one of the purposes of the Remarkable Reinventors community is actually having people hold each other accountable. And we have people who are basically in these smaller subgroups, and they basically say, well, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And they hold each other accountable so that you're making progress. Because at the end of the day, a portfolio career is a career, and any kind of career takes time to build. Exactly. If anything, when I see people building portfolio careers is not to give up too soon, because it takes time, first of all, to land into the right spaces. But if we think about it as a journey of exploration, right? So in that space, we're trying to see where the best fit could be. And also recognize that is probably a continual process. Just like, again, come back to a financial portfolio. It's not like you're going to stick your portfolio in there and never look at it ever again. You're going to keep re-looking at what ought to be in that portfolio.
That's right. Yeah. There is this thing about plateauing, right? There comes a time or a level where promotions are difficult to get by, and you kind of feel you're plateauing. I've seen a lot of people starting to think about portfolio career from there on, right? Like saying, okay, from here, I can stick around, take another 5 years to get my next promotion, or I can start portfolio, right? For those professionals who are not necessarily an executive level yet, who probably have put in 15, 18 years, so they have some, of course, experience with that. Where do they start when they think about portfolio career? Any thoughts around that? And, happy to bounce off, because I guess a lot of people are asking that question.
I think regardless of level, the starting point for portfolio discussion or a consideration really is, how do I want to spend my time? I think early on in our careers, we trade that time for salary for the most part. But at the end of the day, we can choose to trade that time for lots of other things. We can choose to trade that time for experiences, relationships. We can trade that time for health, well-being. Regardless of where someone is in their career, I think that's really the first honest conversation to have with ourselves.
The time.
Which is how we want to spend that time. But it's about laying that foundation for the long haul.
Right. Yeah, I think the operative word I heard is time, right?
Yes.
One, it's time management, but also it takes time to build something. That's really the key. Would you say, because we rewrite the rules and we focus a lot on women leaders, do you think portfolio careers or this concept of portfolio career is really benefiting women more than men?
It's an interesting question, a thought-provoking question, because women have traditionally had more responsibilities outside the workplace. To some extent, they've had to juggle those aspects, and therefore a portfolio career potentially gives them the ability to do all those different aspects. So I think that might be sort of the hypothesis coming in. However, I think that if I look around, I see probably just as many men who are interested and pursuing portfolio careers, but perhaps for different reasons as well. Because I think the other aspect is at what point in life one chooses to go down this path. I used to see people more in their 50s who were looking at portfolio careers. That number has come down even in the last 5 years to people in their 40s. And I start seeing people in their 30s who are now exploring. So and as we look at different generations, then the demographics also shift, because we have different expectations of gender roles and all
Correct.
those sorts of things. Again, gross generalization.
Yeah.
But very often I see men who have a stronger tie in terms of identity to their executive role.
Yes.
And once you leave those titles behind, the question of who am I, what am I, becomes very, very difficult to deal with if that is the sole dimension of one's identity.
Yeah.
Right? Which may make it bit more difficult for them to step into that next chapter.
Yeah.
Whereas for somebody that has a bit more multifaceted identity, it's just an evolution. In that journey.
Yeah. Correct. And the reason I ask about women being more in portfolio career is the element of flexibility and is the element of time, right?
Exactly.
Like where do you spend your time? And you don't have to give up one thing in order to do. You could do both, and you can balance it out depending on your life stage and depending on the responsibility. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to totally switch gears. And one of the things that you've been doing is this amazing expedition all over the world. And the one that I noted and I want you to talk about is this half marathon in Greenland. Tell me more. Like, have you always been a runner? Where did it start? And a half marathon in Greenland? Like,
sounds crazy, right?
That does.
So short answer, no, I have not always been a runner. In fact, people who knew me earlier in my life are rather shocked that I've sort of gone down this path. I didn't start running literally till I was 49. At the time, it was really about trying to prepare for Everest Base Camp. So that was the genesis of it. And because COVID happened, we didn't actually get to Everest Base Camp, of course. But at the first opportunity when borders were opened, my husband and I went to Greenland because it was a stopover point between the US and Singapore.
Okay.
And we came across this Polar Circle Marathon, which happened to be right around the dates that we're going to be there. So we said, let's go do it.
Wow. But I also want to talk about another area of interest, which I don't know a lot about, but I want to hear from you. Your interest in art and promoting local art.
Yes. To me, art is about heritage. It's about history. It's about creativity. It's about fueling innovation. So when you combine all those different aspects, it's really about ensuring that art is to be shared, and to give us some sense of our roots. So the specific area that we focus on is on first and second generation Singaporean artists. And what they capture is elements of Singapore that actually no longer exist. So disappearing scenes, which, in a generation or two have all but disappeared. And that gives us a connection into our roots, into our history, art and music and disciplines like that express in ways that sometimes words are unable to express. And when we think about the essence of being human, it is sometimes the emotion, the ability to empathize, the ability to feel something. So art, long answer, I think is about helping to share with broader audiences the beauty that surrounds us.
There's one question I'm going to ask you, and you can take your time to answer. What is one rule that you have rewritten?
The one rule that I've rewritten is that we each need to find our own path, in spite of what conventional approaches might be. So way back when I was a little girl, I dropped out of kindergarten because I went home one day from school and told my parents I didn't want to go to school anymore. And to their credit, they said, okay. So highly unconventional for Asian parents in particular. But I think that set me on a path of rewriting the rules of do what works for each of us. And it's not really about how our path compares to somebody else because we're different. So find that path that works for yourself.
Awesome. So there was so many things that I kind of noted, writing and also in my mind from our conversation. And there were 3 words that kind of stood out for me again and again in everything that you said. This combination of courage and curiosity. I think that came in every aspect that we talked about, and you kind of kept bringing it back. So those two words stayed with me. And the third was really about time, about two aspects of time. One, manage your time. But the other thing was also everything takes time. I would have kind of, continued this conversation because there were so many good things. But if I were to wrap up and say for our listeners that if you're thinking about portfolio career, I think this is the episode you must listen to, because it's not about one day you decide to quit and next day you start your portfolio career. It takes a little bit of planning. It takes a community because you need to create accountability and, all the wisdom that you shared. So thank you so much and really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, goodness. Thank you. Wow. This is beautiful. This is gorgeous. Wow. Thank you so much. My very own Rewrite the Rules journal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you for your time.
So much.
And thank you once again. Really, I know you're so busy, but thanks for making the time.
Real
I really
pleasure.
wanted to get you on season 4.
Real pleasure. Thank you.